Hi, and welcome to the Joy in Seeing Differently. I'm Terry High, I'm your host, and with me today I have Amanda Clarke. Amanda is a mother and wife and coach and personal friend of mine. Amanda is the coach who helped me to discover my why, the why that actually led to the existence of this video channel in the first place. So welcome, Amanda. Thank you for investing the time to help with this. I know you reasonably well, but maybe for the viewers out there that don't know you, maybe you could just introduce yourself a little more.
Certainly. Thank you, Terry, for involving me in this. It's terrific fun, and thank you for letting me be the first experiment in doing it remotely. I've had quite a varied working life. I started out my career thinking I would become a social worker, in fact, and worked out pretty quickly that I was not in any way mentally prepared for that at the young age of 20. I spent many years loving working in hospitality, had a ball, really enjoyed it until my first child, when I moved into training, which once again I loved, had a fantastic time, and then moved into IT project delivery and discovered, to my surprise, that I really enjoyed that as well. I moved through project delivery into my role now as a coach, where I work closely with project delivery and humans, and the common theme throughout all of that has been the humans that I've been involved with.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. I've personally witnessed you making an enormous difference for people, and I know a lot of your work in helping people see differently so they find joy has been with teams, and a lot of your work is in that sort of training space, and also in that sort of team formation area, bringing groups of people together and helping them to see something differently. But if we sort of hone in on the theme, what does seeing something differently, what does that mean for you? What does that evoke?
For me, the joy part of the joy of seeing things differently is the surprises that I've encountered through my life, where I've had particular beliefs, be they limiting or otherwise, about people, scenarios, events, and through either someone else's reflection or my own reflection or my own experience, I've discovered that the world is different to the way that I'd anticipated it would be. And the joy has been that has opened up greater opportunities, greater experiences, and more variety in my life. So what I discovered also through my own experience was that a lot of what kept me in particular beliefs were artificial constructs, and artificial constructs that I'd internalized, such as guilt or a sense of responsibility in the old-fashioned term of responsibility, that I ought to be a particular way, an expectation that I need to be consistent, that if I were to challenge someone's views who I respect and admire, that maybe meant that I didn't respect and admire them so much.
Mm-hmm.
And the fear of the unknown. So the joy of seeing differently is that when we turn down the volume on the fears, the guilt, the complacency, that it actually opens up a whole new world.
Mm-hmm. That's a wonderful observation. Because as you say, they're not all limiting self-beliefs, but there is this volume of stuff that maybe stops us from experiencing joy. And sometimes they're social norms. Sometimes they're things that were bred into us when we were children by well-intentioned people who did have our best at heart, but maybe didn't quite understand what they were creating when it comes to some of those beliefs. Do you have any particular techniques to help people to turn down the volume?
Sometimes it's awareness. Sometimes it's awareness of known knowns, but also unknown knowns.
Mm-hmm.
And that can help people move along. Being aware of why we hold some things tightly is another good technique. So when we develop a bit of awareness about why we have a belief that we can do something, we can't do something else, that this path is open to us, but that path is closed to us, when we start to unpack some of that, that awareness can help us to shift. And the other big thing, I think, is that people need to allow each other, but more importantly, we need to allow ourselves to change. That we don't have to remain the same. We are, in the culture that I've grown up with, at any rate, there's a high value in staying consistent. Being true to yourself means always being the same, not changing essentially. And saying that it's okay to change and it's okay to experiment, not just with processes and actions and technology, but it's actually okay to experiment with beliefs and ways of interacting with people is a tremendous freedom, and it can open that door a little bit more.
How have you seen that working?
For myself or others?
Yeah, or for others, either way.
Yep. I remember something from my early 20s, which when I tell you the story, you might think it's quite flippant, but it was the meaning that I was able to attach to it that was very empowering. I was, when I grew up, I was very much a tomboy and liked the sports and liked the rough and tough and tumble. And as a young girl and a young woman, I was not very interested in what I looked like and makeup and jewelry and all those sorts of things, which is perfectly fine. But along with that, I developed a belief that women who did like to get dressed up and were quite meticulous about that and seemed to emphasize what they looked like, I decided that they were flippant and not thoughtful and possibly a bit stupid and all of that sort of baggage. And I realized that I held it quite strongly when I was in a job and I was asked to work with another woman who was the epitome of all of those things. And to begin with, I thought, why am I working with this woman and why am I doing this stuff? And this is going to be, you know, really boring and it's not going to be effective. And Janet, that is the name of the lady, was just amazing. She was organized, she was creative, she was insightful, she was just the antithesis of all of my preconceived judgments. And the joy in that, beyond just having an absolute ball working with her, organising what ended up being in the 80s one of the biggest street fairs in the whole of Sydney, and it ended up continuing for another 10 years, was the joy in letting go of a belief that I had.
Right.
And the joy that eventually dawned on me that there were people who I'd encountered in my life who I'd probably slammed the door to unnecessarily because of those preconceived judgments. So that was one instance where I had moved into seeing another human or another human type very differently and experienced the joy as a result of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful observation. Any time that we prejudge another person, and whether it's based on, you know, they dress like a peacock, or it's their background, culture, age, race, anything like that, we actually limit our own ability to experience.
Absolutely.
There is something that person has to teach you, because there is something everyone in the world has to teach you. Everyone has had some experience you haven't had, has some knowledge you don't have. You kind of limit your ability to experience that. And if you can step beyond that, then you open yourself up to layer an infinite universe of experience, knowledge, joy, and it is a joy when you knock something like that on the head. And it's fantastic that you were able to just do that yourself through like your own observation, that this woman who you probably initially thought was a bit sort of a vacant space turned out to be, you know, capable, competent, intelligent, creative, all the things that you said.
Absolutely.
How do you help other people to see their limiting self-beliefs, or to see beyond something that might be holding them back?
Good question. In my role at the moment as a coach, sometimes people come to me with their frustrations. And a typical one in my space might be that we've got something really exciting that we want to deliver into the population and into the workplace from a technical perspective, and that some of our gatekeepers, some of the people that are trying to make us safe, are putting in obstacles or perceived obstacles. So sometimes it's a matter of reframing. I need to have rapport with someone in order to have a meaningful conversation with them. So I need to acknowledge where they are right now, and that their frustration is really genuine, and that what they're wanting to do has value, and that those two things don't need to be mutually exclusive. And then talking about what would happen if this wonderful thing they want to bring into our workplace was completely undermined by a cyber attack or by some negative impact that was not of their creation, that came in externally, and that there is a whole suite of people whose job it is to try and keep us safe. And that has a huge value, because if we aren't safe, then we can't introduce our new changes. And that if we bring on board the people who seem to be putting obstacles in our way, they will ultimately be our most powerful advocates. And that if we can spend a moment seeing things from their perspective between us, we can actually find a solution. While we're sitting there at loggerheads trying to push our own agendas, we're not going to come up with a solution.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really good example, and it aligns really well with your personal example as well. And it strikes me that the sort of the common theme between the two of them is to be able to see from another person's perspective.
And that's where the key is. So most of us do not consider ourselves to be bigots, and most of us consider ourselves to be really fair-minded.
Yes, we do.
That's a self-perception that if you went around and asked different people, I think that each of them would come up with or volunteer. But having said that, we have a lot of learned behaviors, and we have a lot of self-beliefs as well as beliefs about others. And we don't like to appear flaky. We don't like to appear easy to convince and swaying, you know, in the wind. We like to think of ourselves as people with strong beliefs, well-founded in facts and reality.
Yeah.
So sometimes I find it effective to give people the freedom and the space to be a little bit flaky or sway in the wind from time to time. That it's okay to try out a new belief. It might not be with you forever. I've had the experience of cutting someone some slack because I felt like maybe I wasn't seeing their perspective well enough. And at the end of that, actually, their perspective or the way they were approaching it wasn't appropriate or wasn't grounded in fact. But until I go in and look at it and try on that perspective, I'm not able to make that judgment. If I haven't tried it out already, and that's what I say to people, is just try it out. Doesn't mean that you have to change your opinion right now. It doesn't mean you need to change your mind. But if you haven't seen the inverse side of the coin or the view from all sorts of different perspectives, how do you really know that your perspective is the most accurate?
Nice. Yeah, I like that. I have also, in a similar vein, had teams of people that are particularly caught up in seeing something a particular way, and then ask them to argue as if they believed the opposite.
Yes.
Get them to play their own devil's advocate, and it's quite enjoyable for me to see the light bulb go on as they are formulating for themselves the argument that they've been sort of rejecting, or the point of view they didn't feel was valid. So that's a really nice approach, and a really valuable technique, I think, and a tool. Are there any other kind of tools or techniques or approaches that you take for helping people through that?
I was going to mention that one, the red and the blue team, or some of the activities that Deep Democracy gives us around arguing, or everyone having an opportunity to argue the same point together. So both the pros and the cons together argue one side, and then everyone together argues the next side. Some of the 6 thinking hats, you can sometimes use that as a technique for teasing out different ways of thinking. If you're just looking for something completely out of this world, and it's not a dichotomy that you've got, because quite often it's not, then you can try some provocative statements or provocative ideas just to get people thinking in different ways, and along the way, once again, allowing people to let go of the ideas that they've already brought to the table. And it's, once again, it's so important that in letting go those ideas in the moment, you still respect those ideas. Otherwise, they can't be let go of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's some really powerful questions as well. So you know, when we just ask, "What if?"
Yes.
What if that crazy idea turns out to not be crazy? What if
Yes.
that person who is opposing us actually has a really valid reason, and maybe we should be across that reason too? You know, what if I'm wrong?
Yes.
So there you have it. See it from the other's point of view and challenge your own limiting beliefs. Thank you so much, Amanda. I think these are a couple of things that really can help people to see things differently so they can find joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Terry.
Thanks, Amanda.